Hello, I'm Andre J, and today I'm going to talk to you about some more of the Video Waves E edition 2.718 repeating. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about sort of the philosophy and context for development and whatnot. And as always, encourage people to sign up for the Patreon and support these things. But yeah, as usual, as will be kind of the usual thing for these YouTube videos, I want to throw a little bit about sort of like why I'm doing things open source, why I'm making decisions the way I am. Not just to sort of explain where I'm coming from, but because I would like to also influence future developers and sort of like provide, provide like a positive example for certain practices. But yeah, so people are still kind of coming at me a little bit upset, disappointed, frustrated with the fact that I'm trying to like get away from the whole business thing, like the whole thing where I was doing for a while where I focused on, like manufacturing and like selling the Raspberry Pi based video waves, wave pool units and whatnot. People still seem to be really frustrated about that, as though like it's like, I don't know, like it's somehow like worse to be like, this is going to be free and you just sort of like put it together yourself, instead of like I'm just going to focus on just like making it all as like simple and consumerist for y'alls. But yeah, I think like there's just kind of this weird thing, and I sort of want to like talk about that first before I get into the updates. It should be pretty quick. You can just skip halfway through if you don't want to hear me like ramble about this. But yeah, so imagine you are an architect. You went to architect school and you are passionate about designing architecture, buildings or whatever, and I don't know, I have a bit of oats in my mouth still. You have designed a building that you're really proud of. It's really unique and original, and like people really want to. It's like a mixed use, like commercial and residential. Has like amazing landscaping as well. It's like truly a remarkable and like beautiful achievement in the history of architecture. And so you've designed this, you're the architect, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, okay, so what we need you to do is actually stop being an architect, and we'd like you to actually handle like the real estate, the sales aspect. We want you to manage the property. We're gonna need you to like mow the lawns. We're gonna need you to make sure that all of these units are filled. So you're gonna have to interact with all of the clients one-on-one. We're also going to need you to sort of manage the electricity, like making sure everything's still working, and, if a toilet gets clogged, you as the architect who designed this building, you're the one who should be in charge of unclogging the toilets. And of course, you can always just hire people to like do all this stuff for you, and that's probably what they assume you're going to do. But on the other hand, like if you have to hire people to do all this stuff, you still have to manage the people that you're hiring to do these things. So, and the thing you have to keep in mind is that you designed this building. You're highly invested in it. Like, this matters a lot to you. This is something that is like personally important to you. Anyone you hire is, no matter how cool they think it is, no matter how great it is, it's still just going to be, they're working a job. They're getting a paycheck. They're getting paid by the hour or whatever. So it's like, no one is ever going to be as highly invested in your building as you are. So you're still going to have to manage them constantly and sort of like teach them like, there's like, this is a really creative and interesting thing. Like, you can't just like come at it from like the standard way. Like, we did something like new and revolutionary with like the electrical or the plumbing or something. So I'm gonna have to like teach you every aspect of it. But yeah, so it's like kind of like that. Like I was, I'm really passionate and interested in designing things. But the whole like the idea that you're just supposed to like, once you design something that's interesting, you should just like stop and focus as hard and as fast as you can to see how you can make like $1 million or something out of it. It just seems like absurd. It's also kind of like, I think there's like comedian, I don't know if it was like Mitch Hedberg or Norm Macdonald or something in the 90s who was like talking about like people, stand-up comics, they get popular for doing stand-up, and then the next thing is like, okay, well, what we want you to do is just actually stop doing this stand-up, and we want you to be the leading person in this sitcom, as though like everything you had done previous to then, your 15 years of like working as like a stand-up comic is now just going to be like, oh, let's throw that away, and like you're actually going to be working as a lead acting person now, like, and they're just kind of like, yeah, I think I'd rather just do this thing that I'm good at, that I really love to do, instead of just like throwing it away just for the sake of making like $1 million or whatever bullshit. But yeah, so, you know, that's sort of my thoughts on the business thing. I think it's, you know, like, it's also like, so anyone who's ever like invented something or developed something that seems kind of new, they always know, unless they're completely taken in by whatever sort of cult of personality thing they've developed, that they really haven't created anything 100% new. It's all based on something that somebody else, like not just one other person, but like thousands, hundreds of thousands of other people have sort of like laid down the groundwork for you, and you were just there, right person, right place, right time to sort of synthesize things that exist and sort of bring it all together and like make it into something creative. Because creativity isn't really about like, oh, I just like, without any other thing influencing me, I just created this thing all myself and it's mine, I made this. Like, creativity is about synthesizing things that exist already there. Like nobody is like creating things out of nothing. That's this whole, that's like kind of like, it's a very Christian thing, because like if you look at like Christian mythology, there's this, you know, like the Christian God just like makes everything out of nothing, which is actually really uncommon if you look at like different sorts of like mythologies and like creation myths. Like most of the time there's like something that starts, you know, there's like a giant space cow or something that gets killed, or and then the world is made out of this giant space cow's like bones or whatever. I think I just sort of like mixed up like a couple of things from Norse mythology. The space cow actually licked, you know, gods out of like the space ice or whatever, but you know, it's that kind of thing. Or like Mithra slays like the sun bowl or something and then creates the world out of them, or Tiamat, the chaos dragon, gets killed and the world gets created out of their bones and stuff. So yeah, it's a very Christian thing to be like, we produce creativity out of nothing, and it's all us, it's all the individual who made things, instead of, well, actually, there was a lot of work that went on prior to all of this, and I was able to take advantage of the fact that, you know, tons of people have done tons of work on other things which made my creation possible. So synthesis versus creation, something to think about. Nobody really creates things from scratch. Everything is a group effort. If you look at like, I don't know, you can look at like, I like to contrast and compare Edison and Tesla. Both really interesting people, both people who had sort of this like illuminating experience at some point in their life, where they had like a strange illness or a mysterious sort of like fever thing where like their brains got sort of transformed and they like were able to kind of like tap into like, you know, idea space or whatever sort of like strange like psycho-mythological thing you want to like talk about creativity in. But yeah, so Edison and Tesla, one of them was an immigrant, and they had this sort of like all like the utopian ideals that like a lot of immigrants to the United States have, where they like, you know, like they're not like, they might be somewhat cynical, but they try to like, you know, live and work with this sort of American ideal of like utopianism, as compared to like sort of like the obviously like corrupt and decaying European political and social structures of the time when they emigrated. And then you have Edison, born and raised in the States, like very much like cynical and pragmatic about how do you get shit done. You get shit done by like making sure you appease the corporate overlords. Because, you know, like corporate corporate power in the United States has sort of like, it's gone up and down over the years. Like you have like the original like corporation that founded the colony, the British East India Company, run by a corporation, and then it became more like Republican for a long time, and then there was this more robber barons era, railroads and steel. Corporations and banks became more and more powerful. Great Depression happened. Corporations and banks became much, much less powerful. World War II happens. And then military-industrial complex sort of helps some corporations get more and more powerful. And then 70s you have finance, deregulation, and neoliberalism resulting in our modern... We don't really have like... It's not so much corporations which are like the dominant political force in American politics, but finance and this sort of like really bizarre and twisted mix of like government-assisted, government welfare, government-funded private organizations. Like, can we really like say that something like Google is entirely a private organization now, or something like PayPal? Like, these are hybrid public-private things. Like, we have like this form of like state capitalism where there is socialism basically for the incredibly wealthy, like a very functional safety net for incredibly wealthy people. You look at the bailouts in 2008, and that was entirely just a bailout for the incredibly wealthy and did not help anyone who was, you know, had like this sort of predatory, like, was a victim to the predatory mortgage situations. But yeah, corporations, corporate control. Edison knew that basically the way, they mostly just wanted to experiment, tinker, invent, and they figured out pretty quickly the way to do that was to just set up a patent factory. Their research lab was a patent factory to just keep cranking out patents, because as long as you can keep cranking out patents, you've always got income coming in. And it was a patent factory mainly because they understood quite fully that like the nature of creation and invention in the United States was about like, you have to keep making more and more patents, because even if you make one patent and it's really good and it's really amazing, like you have an entire legal and corporate structure which is set up to like basically patent troll your bullshit, like to patent troll your invention. If you look at, very specifically, if you look at the history of a corporation like RCA and how they sort of like patent trolled everything to do with radio and broadcast television early on, basically like legally, they were able to like legally steal and claim for their own like most of these ideas. And RCA is actually not even like, is another prime example of what was not, it seemed like it was like an independent corporation. Most people probably think it was an independent corporation. It was founded by the Navy to make sure that like radio and broadcast television technology was firmly in the hands of like what was perceived as like an independent corporation, but what was in actuality like an appendage of the United States Navy. So yeah, patent trolling has been happening for forever, and it's like my knowledge of this sort of a thing, which has continued unabated throughout like U.S. history. The fact that a powerful and wealthy corporation can just like easily and legally steal your ideas by just throwing a seemingly infinite amount of money at things. It's like if you play the whole patent game, if you want to play this whole game of pretending that like you can like copyright an idea or whatever, you're kind of just feeding into this whole structure of like the same thing that gives the corporations the power to then sort of claim, okay, well, fuck you, Phineas, you think you invented television? Well, actually, we have a lawyer and we've got like legal proof that we actually invented the real television before you did, so you can go fuck yourself. But yeah, like, so Edison, you know, worked within this whole thing and just said, well, I'm not going to fight patent trolls. I'm just going to keep making more and more patents. Like, just keep them going. So even if, you know, Westinghouse manages to, like, patent troll something I did, like, I'll have another 10 patents coming out. So they just played, like, they played a numbers game. And they played it very well. That's what they wanted to do with their life, and they succeeded on their own terms. You know, Tesla had a much more utopian idea. They thought they could, like, play off, like, East Coast, like, the East Coast money barons, one off another, to sort of like create a world where you had like free wireless power for everyone on the planet. And unfortunately, like, you can't really do that within these systems. You have to, if you want to create free public utilities for like humanity as a whole, you have to figure out a way to bypass the entire system. You can't gain corporate America into like providing free anything for anyone. It's just like systematically cannot happen. But yeah, so, and yeah, like I said, this isn't just me like griping and whining about things. I want to like tell people about how I'm coming at my ideas, like why I have this sort of ethos of like, we just make everything free and public and share it with everyone, because like the options, there's not a lot of great options for anyone. Like, I could try to play this whole game of like, okay, I'm gonna copyright and patent video waves or some shit, and then directly try to make money off of it, but I don't have any money to begin with. Like, if you don't have capital to begin with, you can't really compete with any large company. If like some other, if Google or Facebook or someone else just wanted to steal this shit and put it into whatever they're making, like, they could do it, and they could just sue me into bankruptcy if I like tried to like fight it. Like, patents and lawyers don't mean anything if you don't have the money to back it up. Like, it's like, I feel like people are sort of like in this denial about how like American justice works, but it's fundamentally all about just how much money do you have. You can just throw money at a problem and buy your own justice just to get like revenge on someone. Look at the whole Peter Thiel Gawker thing. Like, Peter Thiel got pissed that Gawker outed them like a long time ago, and then just basically laid in wait and waited until they could find like a decent legal case to put against them. The Hulk Hogan sex tape thing came up. Gawker leaked it, and not just leaked it, but they were holding the sex. I think one of the employees was like held the sex tape on the like a company drive or something so that other people could download it. And then they're like, okay, blammo, Peter Thiel anonymously like funded the entire legal case against them for Hulk Hogan for the sole purpose of driving Gawker into bankruptcy. Because that's how Peter Thiel feels about free speech. Peter Thiel feels about like the rights, like the idea of like freedom of speech in the United States is that freedom of speech is the freedom of people who have money to like destroy the freedom of speech of anyone else. So, you see this kind of thing, and you study the history of like how this shit works in the United States, and you're just like, why the fuck would I even want to play that game? Why would I even like want to get involved with like like there's this whole thing where if you want to call something open source, technically open source is a copyrighted term, and there's like a foundation that will like that might like try to fuck you up if you like say open source but you don't provide like the correct license. This is another one people have come at me about like open source Creative Commons licensing and shit. I'm just like, you play that game. Once you start playing the game of lawyers and you use that language, and if you listen to my other talk on like magical narrative and how like the language you use and the sort of like narrative you want to live in, you choose to live in, is going to like heavily affect like not just your world, like how you live, but how other people are going to treat you, the political games that they treat you. Once you start playing those games, once you start living in that world and you like adhere to that like magical like reality tunnel, like you have just set yourself up to be victimized by it. Like, you play the game that like some sort of like license is somehow gonna like protect you or like save you from like anyone trying to like actively like harm you, and it's like, no, it's not. Like, anyone can just pay enough money and like fuck you over. Like there's no like Creative Commons license that's actually gonna like hold up against if someone like Peter Thiel wants to just throw millions of dollars to personally destroy you. Like, none of that is gonna like make any difference. There's no like equal justice in the United States legal system for anyone or anything. It's all just literally, you have more money, you have more power. The only way we can try to like get beyond this whole money, power, justice thing is to stop pretending that money means anything. Like, and this is probably a pretty good time to start stop pretending that like money means anything, because what we're seeing right now is a global situation where dollarization, like many countries are moving away from supporting the dollar standard as like an international like foundation of how currency works, and moving away from the U.S. Treasury bond standard. A huge thing we're seeing in the China's Belt and Road Initiative, in this whole conflict between the United States, the new Cold War between the U.S. and Russia, where Russia, the U.S. basically like they tried to seize like $300 billion of like Russian foreign dollars held in this the goal of like destabilizing the ruble, which actually failed horribly and has actually strengthened the ruble a lot. And now the result of all of these sanctions against Russia has made it so that like Russia has now said, okay, well, we're not in the SWIFT system, so there's no one can buy our oil or gas for dollars anymore, or any of the other resources we have. So I guess we're just going to be like moving to, if you want to buy natural gas from us, which most of Western Europe will really need to do if they don't want to freeze to death, you're going to have to pay in rubles. Which means that the value of the dollar and the value of the pound too, and any other like what is it, the pound? Are they still using the euro in UK? I forget how that shit works. Like they tried to quit the EU, right? Sorry, I'm not super up on like eurozone stuff. Other than like what I'm talking about here. Please correct me in the comments if you know what the fuck I'm actually trying to say here. But yeah, so the dollar is being destabilized. Like the world is moving towards a multipolar balance of payments with currencies, so that like India's currency and China's currency and Saudi Arabia's currency will start to like hold more weight than just like having the dollar be like propped up by like all of these countries who are basically in like imperial military and commercial servitude to the United States. So dollars aren't even going to be worth that much in the future. Like we should stop pretending that dollars are like a reason to like do anything and start thinking about how can we share things one another in order to try to build a community, because community will help us where dollars will completely fail. Invest all your time and energy in making dollars and then find out 2 years later that like $1 million can really only buy you like 5 pounds of potatoes and like half a tank of gas, then you're kind of fucked. But yeah, so that's the end of the socio-political section, and now we'll start talking about some of the new updates for Video Waves 2.5. So as far as the development sides of things go, the experiment and like poking things and what I'm going to add, I think we're pretty much done with most of the new feedback modes. So let me just sort of bring this in here. So we'll just set the delay amount to 0. Let me turn on the keying a little bit more. I covered the new mixing and keying modes. And so you can check the previous video on Video Wave updates for mixing and keying. So let's talk about some of the new stuff we've added to the color space. So you can see right here that we have hue offset, saturation offset, and bright offset. These will do slightly different things. They'll allow you to do more tweakable control to a lot of things. Actually, let me go in and sort of turn off this geometry LFO here. So turn the amp down to 0 and let me bring the Z sort of back up to, so we can see a bit more of like explicitly what's happening here. All right. And then I can key us in a little bit stronger even. All right. So here we go. So let's just kind of take a look at hue offset, saturation offset, and bright offset. So this is going to make things look a lot more like if you ever played with like SDI mixers, SDI hardware video mixers, this looks almost exactly like the kind of feedback you'll get in that when you start messing around with stuff. I've seen this in like Sony DFS systems, I've seen this in like Grass Valley stuff. It's this really kind of like crunchy, vivid, like super saturated like video feedback stuff. A little different from the HSB attenuation kind of things. And if you think about it, doing offsets instead of attenuation is going to give you just like, it's going to give you a more like detailed control over things, and just allows for like more fun tweaking. kind of interesting thing, which I'm not quite sure what exactly is going on, but I'll look into it. We offset things into negative, and it really kind of like adds this interesting like reversal of like, okay, so for whatever reason, negative hue is making things kind of black out for a second and then bounce back. I'm going to look into it more, but like a lot of the mistakes I end up making, I might just end up keeping it in because it's a very fortuitous mistake. So we've got hue offset, and then we reset. So the other nice thing is that I'm setting up like parameter resets. This has been like a request for a long time, and finally with this update I'm going to make it so you can reset each sort of module within the block, and then you'll be able to reset everything globally with the button right up here, and then there'll be another global reset which will just reset everything. The controller reset will actually work this time. Hue, saturation, and bright attenuation all work the same. Something else to note is I've added range controls for everything. So you'll be able to remap the ranges for all of these. And probably once I'm finished up and I've got the final version, I'll do a little instructional video that shows you how you can set different default ranges for everything too. We replaced the hue LFO thing with hue shaper. So the hue shaper, hue offset will kind of replace like that the hue X mod and hue X LFO things. They do basically the same thing, and I brought off the hue X mod thing. So the chaotic hue things have kind of been tamed and folded into some larger structures. We also have these PAL map things. And these sort of are like another form of shaper. They're like a curves thing where you sort of just make the contrast more intense. But these will allow for a lot more tweaking of things. Keeping these values really low is the ideal thing too. So let me reset again here. And then we've also set up overflow values for like bright and saturation in the feedback. So if you kind of see how that works, you get this weird kind of like strobing thing going on. So it's not quite like the invert strobing, and if you slow it down, it can make some pretty interesting things. But yeah, it's quirky, weird, fun times. Gotta make sure I add that one into the reset. And then we have another color space. So let me add some geometry into here just so we kind of like can see a bit more what's going on with these different color space things. So saturation a little bit higher. Alright, so color space 2. First thing off is we have color quantization. So this is sort of like advanced posterize. I always forget how you pronounce that. Posterize is a common thing in like mixers, or if you're trying to make like a GIF in 2000 or in like 1998, you need to posterize things and like sort of restrict your color space that you're working in so it's quantized. So we kind of start off here, and the more you quantize it, the less basic numbers of colors you have to work with. So you can kind of get like, and you can think of this as just being like 24, this is like 24-bit color. 128 is like 128-bit color. And you have the ranges up here, so you can make these ranges go like all the way up to 512 if you want. So you can quantize the color, bring it down to like, 4 bits or something, and playing around with this and the other things will give you some pretty neat and like, it'll get you out of just straight up rainbow zones all the time. Originally the hue X chaos modes were for like getting out of rainbow zones, but there's just some more efficient ways I can do that now. So you can quantize the colors. And then you can quantize saturation and brightness too. So this will help out. This will do some pretty crazy things when you're trying to key multiple feedback channels into one another, because this will add sort of, if you bring it down a lot, it adds sort of like a thresholding kind of thing. And you look at this and you see, oh yeah, that looks a lot like, like a Panasonic MX 50 style feedback thing. But yeah, bright quantization. So these are just basically advanced sorts of posterization. It's also a nice way if you want to make this look like it was on like an Amiga or an Atari ST or like an Apple IIe. It'll give you like that sort of restricted color palette. Also, to make things look more like old school, we've got dithering added in, so you can dither each individual like color space thing, and this will give you a lot of pretty neat like structures and textures. And yeah, I'm just absolutely in love with the dithering right now. It's probably my favorite thing, and it's slowing me down on the development a lot, just playing around with this and seeing all the neat things. So you're going to be super stoked on dithering. We can dither hue, we can dither saturation, we can dither the brightness, and working with these things with the new bright offset and POW mapping things will give you a lot of interesting stuff too. Woo! And allow you to control things in a really nifty and interesting way. Yeah, also the music in the background. Some of you might know, usually when I embark on a large-scale like coding project, I like to make a nice long mix that'll help me work so I don't have to stop every 45 minutes and try to find something that will help me be productive on YouTube to listen to. So I made like a 7-hour long like mix to celebrate to help me focus on the new thing. So, and hopefully whenever I'm finished up with this, I should have enough like footage that I can make like a couple of like YouTube videos with this mix to sort of share what's going on with the new updates and just kind of like share the kind of music I like to listen to, because that's a request I get often. So yeah, color space too. We've got all that stuff. So we've got 2 geometry modes, or zones now too. We've got the range control for everything. We've got X, Y, and Z, and rotate, all the standard stuff. We have some different rotate modes. So I noticed that, so it's rotation, but no matter what sort of aspect ratio you're in, it always rotates perfectly in a circle, because I was just using like a very basic sort of like rotational matrix. So I did a little bit of research on like different rotational matrices, and I found out that actually using the aspect ratio allows you in the rotation matrix, like just multiplying in and multiplying out by like aspect ratio stuff, allows you to sort of preserve the aspect ratio of the video as it rotates. So with different aspect ratios, you can select different rotate modes. Default rotate mode will still be like perfectly circular if you want to do this sort of like mandala style rotations. But you can also click the rotate mode, and then the rotation will not warp the input video, and it will rotate in this sort of oval shape, which sort of follows whatever aspect ratio you're working in. So yeah, new rotations, be a lot of fun. I'm going to reset this. Okay. We have shear matrix involved, and what a shear matrix is sort of, it's able to do these sort of squeezes. So you're sort of independently stretching in the X and Y direction. And you're also able to sort of like warp things up and warp things down. And this works really nice with the different, so we've got overflow select, so you can do toroid or mirror. And being able to warp things like that gives a really interesting kind of spatialization sort of thing. So squeezing things and then sort of smooshing them up, smooshing them over that way. And yeah, you can change like everything. You can go up to the ranges and change the ranges. Oh yeah, I also changed the rotate range can go all the way around too, which, you know, it seemed like I originally was just like, oh yeah, I don't need to be able to rotate in a full like pi direction, but then I started playing around with like physical rotations of like cameras, and I realized, yeah, it is actually different. Even though it seems like that might be like isomorphic like rotations, isomorphic symmetries, in effect, it once you actually start playing with it, it is different to go all the way, be able to go all the way around. Boop. Reset that. So that's one of the new blocks of geometry things. And in the second block of geometry things, we've added a fisheye. Ooh. And fisheye, if you can do it just a tiny amount, and that'll give some pretty interesting like barrel distortion kind of things. If you want to go way overboard, we go to the overflow select toroid, and then change the range. And then see what happens when you start going negative a lot. You get this this pretty crazy pattern, which is just sort of like, it's like a glitching out of the arctangent function that's being used to sort of recalculate like values of x and y, the angles from the center and whatnot. So yeah, a lot of fun things that can happen in here. With the fisheye, yeah, let me change the ranges here too. Oh, the ranges are back. Oh shit. Looks like I need to, that's a bug I'll need to fix. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Do I need to go in here? If I reset that, does that fix this? There we go. Still a lot of bugs. Never ends. You can also change like the X and Y points where the fisheye is happening, and that glitches things up in a really fun way. We have spiraling instead of so reset, reset. How did I do that before? I fixed it just a second ago, right? Alright, well, now I know. Gotta put that in the notes. Let me reset this and come back to it in a second. Alright, here we go. Here's where we get into, so we have a spiral instead of rotation, which does, you know, exactly what it sounds like. It twists the feedback in a spiral instead of just rotating it. We have like X and Y points we can alter for that. We can change the amount of spiral as well as the angle. I haven't quite fully tweaked these values to like their optimal ranges yet, but that'll definitely happen before we're done here. We've got spirals, and then we also have, let's see if I can just reset these. Boop. Boop. So, oh yeah, I was also, when I was researching the GUI thing, I realized if you control click on things, you can set them back to numerical values. So control click on the GUI allows you to reset things or enter in specific number values. And yeah, I know a lot of people say that this stuff is really poorly documented, and you know, on a certain sense that's true. In another sense, because this is all like open source shit and it's mostly built out of open frameworks and all the open framework stuff, it's actually incredibly well documented. You just have to like do your own research and look up on the open frameworks boards and look up what the plugins are doing. You can find out everything you need to know about it. So like, to a certain extent, yes, I have not just copied and pasted massive amounts of data from the open frameworks and all the open frameworks plugin things to the video waves page, but I also sort of like trust people to be like, you know, have enough of an agenda and like desire to make things work to like go out of their way and educate themselves. Yeah, I you know, I sometimes get in trouble with this because like people really want to come at me with this whole like customer service, like I'm fucking McDonald's or something, like, and like if you just complain hard enough, I'll make things like right for you and make them easier for you. And yeah, that's not really my thing. I trust people to sort of like be intelligent adults and like try to like figure things out for themselves if it's not immediately apparent. Yeah, coming at me with the whole like customer service, like sort of like, you know, like the entitlement of like the standard American consumerist entitlement is really gonna kind of like make me a little grumpy. I'm not gonna lie, this has made me a little grumpy at people before, and it's just because like, I don't know, that sort of like self-absorbed entitlement just really kind of like rubs me the wrong way. I don't want to deal with it. It's another reason I'm not interested in like running sales and like maintaining like a business where I'm selling things to people. It's because you have to deal with like this sort of like almost unimaginably vast entitlement of like Americans when it comes to like them buying shit. I remember reading somewhere something that like money seems to like money is like this way of sort of like destroying social relations and creating this sense of entitlement. So if you think about it, like if you go over to your friend's house and they make you a meal, you're not gonna like complain about it the same way you would if you went to like a restaurant and ordered a meal. And part of that is just like some people just get trained to complain about shit because then they're going to get a discount, because restaurants and like other places just really tend to like spoil the fuck out of people with this whole the customer is always right thing, where you're just like, oh, you complain? Well, let me just give you 10% off. Because, you know, we just really want to make you happy here. But you go to your friend's house and they make you something, unless you and your friend are both really into cooking, you're both old friends and you, like, have a rapport where you're just, like, really honest and, like, can be, like up forthright and critical about things. You don't just complain about these tiny things. Like, oh, shit, like, one of these potatoes was just a little kind of, like, al dente in the middle, like... You know, and like next time, like usually what I do is I par cook them a little bit first and make sure that like, you know, once I deep fry them, they're like, basically all I'm doing is crisping them up. But yeah, the moment you like put down money on something, then you automatically think, oh, well, I have the right to like, basically, I am a child that is being serviced here and I can just like complain as much as I want. And even if I'm really satisfied with it and I just complain, maybe I'll get something for free out of it. Oh my god. But yeah, that's the other thing. If you complain about poor documentation for like free open source stuff, like you know, join the Patreon. Actually sort of like help me out, or you could help make some of the documentation. If you've had difficulty putting things together, but you figured it out on your own, like write things down and share them in like the Discord or like Scanlines. I'm trying to get away from the Facebook group. Facebook group has been great to me. Thanks everyone who's a part of that. But let's try to move things over to Discord and Scanlines for the future so that I don't ever have to log on to Facebook again. But yeah, so we've now got Kaleidoscope as well, which is really interesting as like a sort of a counterpoint to the mirror modes, because we have these kaleidoscope segments that you can use, but you can also choose the slice that you're sort of kaleidoscoping from. So you can change the angle of mirrors sort of arbitrarily. And I think once I get the LFOs all hooked up and you can like modulate these constantly, then you're gonna have some like pretty bonkers ass psychedelic shit going on here. I was doing like a lot of the stuff I do with this ends up looking like who's that Enter the Void, the Vortex person, like they're sort of like opening title things. It's almost like to the point where I'm not sure if I should post that stuff on like social medias at all, because I think it might, you know, make some people like nauseous and scared. But yeah, so you can control the amount of segments, so you have sort of like arbitrary like numerical like symmetry going on here. So this will be really handy if you're interested in invocation and like sacred geometry things, and you want to have some very specific like axes of rotations for your feedback, for making your animated sigils. And you can also go up to the ranges and set segments up to like 100, so you're getting to the point where it's, you know, I wonder if I should set that even higher so we can like try to get to like where the segments are essentially like an infinite Lie group or something, in terms of like oversampling on the pixels. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Haven't finished it yet. So that's the new geometry stuff. Geometry stuff is super fun. I'm having a lot of good times with experimenting with that. Boop, boop, boop. And yeah, so basically the next things I have left to do to finish this, oh yeah, we also just moved the pixelate things to like where they belong. So if you really want to make some like crunchy like old school like video game graphics, you can use the quantization, the dithering, and the pixeling to like have your own like personal like Amiga style video feedback stuff. But yeah, so as far as production goes, or development goes on this, I have basically all the functions that I want to have here. I'm still sort of on the fence if I want to include wipes in this version. I might use save wipes for like a little update to the mixing, like maybe partway through this year. But I basically just need to like add in the LFOs, add in the text mods for everything, and then just like fold that in everywhere. I need to add the new mixing thing into channel 1 and channel 2 for these things, and fix and tweak a couple of this stuff in the channel thingies. But then we're pretty much done on video waves, and then I'll have to get started on the artificial life updates. But yeah, so things are looking pretty good, you know. As far as a timeline goes, I want to be done with this by the end of this summer. Theoretically, it could happen sooner, but it would need to involve more people donating money to the Patreon, because I still have to make a living somehow. I'm doing a lot of online teaching and IRL teaching here at Phase Space. So that's always dope. If you don't want to join the Patreon, but you just want to like give some lump sums, you can always donate to my PayPal. There's buttons all over my website for doing that. And if you can't afford the Patreon but want to help support, literally just like spread the word. Tell other people about Video Waves. Tell other people about what I'm trying to do here. Encouraging open source sharing, trying to like de-dollarize our psychology as the world de-dollarizes their monetary systems. I mean, do you want to let the global economy get ahead of your psychological situations? No, right? Try to appeal to some sort of like FOMO, American FOMO, to get them involved in de-dollarizing their brains. But yeah, there's a lot of ways you can help. Also, I'm setting up some projects for group work for the new Video Waves thing. So if you can program in C++, GLSO, you have any sort of like GUI or like MIDI learning like experience on things, we've got a bunch of projects for people to sort of like work on if they want to like devote time and resources to development of these things. Yeah, so I guess, as usual, have fun, and let me know in the comments how you feel about the updates, if you have any requests, where you'd like to see this go, if you really need to see like mixer-style wipes involved in this, definitely let me know. I've been trying to like gauge like desire on this, but you know, doing it in the distributed function makes it sort of like hard to tell like who's actually interested in what these days. But yeah, as always, have fun and see you next time.